Thank you for joining me to learn a little bit more about the Thomas R. Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellowship Program. My name is Dr. Lily Lopez-McGee, and I am the director of the fellowship program. The Thomas R. Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellowship Program is a program, a U.S. Department of State funded program administered by Howard University. It was created in 1992 as a way to promote excellence and diversity in the U.S. Department of State's Foreign Service, and we are excited to tell you a little bit about what the fellowship entails and how you can apply to the fellowship program. So let's talk a little bit about the Pickering Fellowship Program. I'm just going to do a basic overview of the program here. You can find additional information about the program either later in the longer version of this presentation or in our playlists on the YouTube channel. The Pickering Graduate Fellowship Program is a program that is geared towards promoting excellence and diversity in the U.S. Department of State's Foreign Service. And it includes up to $42,000 in funding towards a 2-year master's degree program in an area of relevance to the Foreign Service at a U.S.-based institution. Our fellows will often pursue degrees such as international affairs, public policy, public administration, business administration, economics, regional studies, migration studies, social work, and others that are related to the career as a Foreign Service generalist. Our program begins with an intensive orientation to the program and the Foreign Service, where our fellows will be flown out to Washington, D.C. to spend a week learning about the fellowship program and the Foreign Service, as well as developing skills related to preparing for their internships and entering the Foreign Service. Following the orientation, our fellows will begin their first year of graduate studies, and in between their first and second year of graduate studies, will participate in a 10-week internship in Washington, D.C. at the Department of State. Following the second year of graduate studies, our fellows will do another 10-week internship, this time overseas at a mission, embassy, or consulate abroad after they've completed their graduate degree program. And then, assuming that they have completed all of the components and the requirements and obligations of the fellowship program, they will enter the Department of State's Foreign Service as Foreign Service Officer Generalists. There is a 5-year service obligation, so our fellows, after completing their graduate degree programs, will serve at minimum of 5 years in the Department of State as a Foreign Service Officer. During the time as fellows, our team prepares them by providing mentors as well. So each of our fellows receives a senior level Foreign Service Officer mentor with 10 or more years of experience in the department, and a peer mentor, someone who is usually mid or early career and has gone through the Pickering Fellowship Program. So our fellows do receive lots of support along the way. And employment with the Department of State's Foreign Service will take place for all of our fellows who successfully complete the program, meet the Foreign Service entry obligations, and in accordance with applicable law and State Department policy will begin their career as a Foreign Service officer. So the program is comprehensive. We do provide lots of support along the way and are eager to have you all as applicants. The Pickering Fellowship has 3 core eligibility requirements for those who are interested in applying to our fellowship. The first is that all applicants must have their U.S. citizenship at the time of the application deadline. We will ask for a copy of your photo passport page, a copy of your certificate of naturalization, or a copy of your birth certificate to confirm this. All applicants must also have a 3.2 GPA on a 4.0 scale. This is either taken from your undergraduate institution where you received your undergraduate degree, or a cumulative GPA of the institutions where you've attended for a year or more. The third obligation or eligibility requirement for all candidates looking to apply to our program is that you must be seeking enrollment to a 2-year master's degree program in the fall of 2022 in a field of study relevant to the U.S. Department of State's Foreign Service, such as international affairs, business administration, public administration, management, migration studies, and among other types of programs. As a note, all candidates must also be planning to apply to graduate programs separate from the Pickering application process. So while we do not require that you have you've gained admissions to a graduate program at the time of the deadline, which is September 22nd this year, we do require that you do apply to the graduate program separate from us. So we ask that you keep track of the deadlines for the individual graduate programs where you may be planning to apply. The timeline for the 2022 fellowship application is as follows. Our application opened in July of 2021. The application will close at 11:59 Eastern Standard Time on September 22nd. We will notify everyone of their status of their application on October 29th, and we will invite 90 finalists to participate in a final selection process later in November. That selection process, which includes a 25-minute interview and a 1-hour writing exercise, will take place between November 15th and 19th of 2021. On November 19th, we will notify everyone, all of the finalists, of their status with the fellowship program, and we will also select 45 fellows to participate in the Pickering Fellowship Program. Our orientation for our Pickering Fellows will take place in early June of 2022. We will finalize the dates over the next few months, and you can find the dates to the orientation updated later this fall. The Pickering Fellowship Award funding is broken out in a couple of different ways. I mentioned in our overview of the fellowship program that we will provide up to $42,000 towards a 2-year master's degree program in an area of relevance to the Foreign Service. Of those $42,000, $24,000 comes in the form of tuition assistance. Tuition mandatory fees, including student health insurance, is included in this category of funding. That funding is issued directly to the graduate school program. We also provide $18,000 per year to each fellow that goes towards a living stipend. This funding is really intended to cover the cost of housing, food, transportation, and other incidental expenses that come up during the year. Each of the 10-week internships does also include up to $11,000 for those 10 weeks. It includes a stipend of approximately $7,000, in addition to transportation to and from either Washington, D.C. for the domestic internship or to the international location where the fellow is doing their overseas internship. For the overseas internship, we also include funding for visas, inoculations, vaccinations, and any required fees that come along with traveling internationally. We also provide basic health insurance coverage for the overseas internship component of the fellowship. Throughout the course of the fellowship program, we also provide professional development opportunities and mentorship from current Foreign Service officers. In the overview of the fellowship program, I mentioned that we will pair our fellows with a senior Foreign Service officer as well as a peer mentor who's gone through the Pickering Fellowship Program. Important to note here is that while our funding is up to $42,000 per year towards your graduate degree, there are many graduate programs that provide additional funding. We work now with over 40 graduate school partners who have committed to providing additional funding to Pickering Fellows for their graduate degree program, and we'd encourage you to check out our website to see where some of those programs are. Fellows are not required to go to our partner institutions. They are eligible to take their funding to programs that meet the requirements of the program funding, but it is helpful to take a look at the partner schools that are listed on our website. With great benefits also come some obligations. So the Pickering Fellowship Program does entail a number of additional requirements in addition to the components of completing the graduate degree and the 2 internships. All of our fellows are required to obtain and maintain State Department medical, security, and suitability clearances, maintain a 3.2 GPA throughout the program, meet the State Department Foreign Service entry requirements, and fulfill a 5-year service obligation. We do have quite a bit of detailed information about what the security, medical, and suitability clearances entail on our website, and I'd encourage you to review it in more depth if you are interested in learning about what that process looks like but I'd like to highlight just a few things because this is a very important part of the obligations of the fellowship. Our fellows, and the moment that we onboard them as fellows in November after the selections process, we will begin the security clearance process. Our fellows will complete the security clearance forms that will get them started with the diplomatic security process. In the case, during that process, our fellows will be asked for a whole host of information and material. If you are, again, interested in learning about what that process looks like, please visit our website for additional information. I do want to mention two items that can come up that could prevent folks from obtaining a security clearance, and those often will include issues of drug use or issues of financial irresponsibility. And let me tell you a little bit about what that means. So while there are states in the United States that have legalized the use of marijuana, oftentimes marijuana comes up as a potential issue from preventing someone from receiving a TS clearance. General rule of thumb is that time mitigates. So if you have used in the last year or between a year and 18 months, we'd encourage you to perhaps consider applying in another application cycle. While marijuana use is permitted at the state level, it is still considered a Class 1 federal offense and could prevent you from obtaining a security clearance. For financial irresponsibility, what we're looking at here is how it is that you've managed your finances. It's not so much that you have debt. If you don't have debt, I'd be quite surprised and would give you lots of kudos for that. But if it's not so much of whether or not you have debt, but how you've managed your financial obligations. So what we're considering here is cases where perhaps folks have not paid their taxes, or perhaps have not kept up or maintained communication with creditors where they may be in default and that kind of thing. We're really looking for what diplomatic security is often looking at is your financial management behaviors and what that looks like as a whole. So if you do have individual questions about your current circumstances, we are happy as staff to talk to you about any individual concerns. Obviously, with the caveat that ultimately the decision will be diplomatic security's decision about granting security clearances, and you will ultimately have to make the decision as to whether or not this is the time that you'd like to apply to the program. As a quick note, the clearances do not start until after our fellows are awarded the fellowship program, and we will provide additional review of security clearances and medical clearances at the time that we do our final selections process, where we'll actually invite folks from the department to talk about in more depth about those areas of the obligations. In addition to obtaining and maintaining those clearances, we also require that our fellows maintain a 3.2 throughout their progression through their graduate program. So we do ask our fellows to submit grades after each semester to make sure that they are on track with their academic performance. All of our fellows are also required to take the Foreign Service Officer test, the written exam, at least one time during the time that they're in the program. Our fellows are not required to pass the written exam, but they do have to take it in the time that they're with the fellowship. If you have taken the FSOT, the written exam, and you have passed it, you are able to submit that passage notification to meet the obligation of taking the FSOT as a Pickering Fellow. All of our fellows are required to take and pass the Foreign Service Officer oral assessment. They do have, from the time that they start their obligations to the fellowship up until the 5-year service obligation is complete, to complete that FSOA, Foreign Service Officer oral assessment requirement. The fellows will have an opportunity to take it while they're in the program, and then again they have up until their 5-year service obligation is done to pass it. And then again, and just to reiterate, there is a 5-year service obligation. So all of our fellows, after they complete their overseas internship, will then enter the Foreign Service and be required to remain for at least 5 years afterward, though we have many of our Pickering Fellows who stay long after the 5-year service obligation because of the nature of the dynamic nature of the Foreign Service. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what the Foreign Service entails in just a minute, and in a different section of this presentation. So let's talk a little bit about the graduate school experience for our fellows. As I mentioned, there are some criteria that we look for in funding particular types of programs. All of the graduate school programs that our fellows are eligible to participate in must be based at a U.S.-based institution here in the United States, and they have to be broad-based programs in areas such as international relations, public policy, public administration, management, business administration, organizational development, migration studies, and and other like programs. The programs do need to be 2-year programs as well. Programs that are more technical in nature, such as public health or agriculture, would not be eligible. Our fellows do go in to become Foreign Service Officer Generalists, so the type of degree programs that they need tend to be less narrow in focus in terms of the discipline and broader based to provide broad-based skills for their work as Foreign Service officers. If you are interested in areas such as that or international education, for example, we could provide funding towards a 2-year master's public policy degree program, for example, where then you could focus on that more specific discipline that you might be interested in as well. They do have to be 2-year programs, so law degrees and joint degrees that extend the programs beyond the 2 years are not permitted. Similarly, doctoral programs are not within the purview of the fellowship for funding either. Fellows must be full-time and maintain a 3.2 throughout the course of the program, and the programs must be conducted in person under normal circumstances. We are not able to provide funding for an online-based program. And then our programs can be taken to any institution in the United States that meets these criteria. If you have specific questions about graduate school programs that may not be reflected on our partners list, I'd encourage you to look back at this criteria and see, does it meet the 2-year master's obligation? Does it have an international component to the curriculum? Is it based in the United States? And is it completely in person? Assuming that your graduate programs meet those obligations, we will consider the funding for that particular program. I do want to mention here the importance of differences between graduate institutions. While our funding is relatively generous funding, $42,000 can go a lot further in different parts of the United States than it can in others. So if you're looking at programs in the New York and Washington, D.C. area, the cost of living is going to be much higher. And some of the institutions do also have higher tuition rates. So our funding may go further at some institutions, whereas at other institutions, it may only be a drop in the bucket. So as you're looking at graduate schools, I'd encourage you to consider a few different components or factors of what graduate school is really in line with your interest. Look at the curriculum. What are the classes that you have to take? What does your core coursework require? Is there more flexibility in the second year, or is it all pretty rigid? Check out the location of your program. Is this a place that you could see yourself in the next 2 years, for the next 2 years of graduate study? Also consider accessibility to faculty. There are some graduate programs whose faculty are much more available to meet with students than perhaps others. So as you're considering the different graduate school components, I'd encourage you to think about all of the factors that go into attending an education program over the course of 2 years. Also, we'll make our decisions about the fellowship program well in advance of when our fellows are required to have been admitted to the program. So during this 2022 application cycle, folks will know before Thanksgiving as to whether or not they have funding for graduate school, which could make it a space where if you are not successful this year, you could come back and apply in the following year. And if you are successful this year, then perhaps you might be able to apply to more graduate programs than you had initially anticipated. I do want to just emphasize one thing here is that during the application process, you do not have to know where it is that you're going. We will ask you, though, which graduate school programs you're considering. So you'll see that in the application. If you have been admitted to a program already and perhaps you're on deferral, you are also welcome to list that information in the application as well. And then just as a reminder, the U.S.-based institution component is really important. There are many more graduate programs that now have joint programs where you can do 1 year in the United States at a U.S. institution and 1 year overseas with an international or institution. The important thing here to note is that your 2-year degree is coming from the same U.S.-based institution, and that the funding is being issued to the U.S.-based institution. If the program does not meet either of those two requirements, then it will be considered attending a non-U.S.-based institution, and we would not be able to support funding for that. So let's talk about the different components of the fellowship program. The first experience that we'll have with our fellows is an intensive 1-week orientation program that will take place in Washington, D.C. We will house our fellows at Howard University for that week and begin the medical exam process. All of our fellows will be scheduled to take medical exams at the Department of State, pending availability of the medical unit. Right now, because of the ongoing pandemic, our medical unit is not available for exams, but assuming that it is during the orientation next year, then we will set up exams for our fellows. In addition to the medical exams, we will also conduct a number of intensive professional development and networking opportunities for our fellows. This will include conversations with current Foreign Service officers, retired Foreign Service officers, networking opportunities with different affinity groups in the department, as well as Pickering Fellows who are based in the DC area. We'll also spend quite a bit of time at the Department of State getting very familiar with Maine State and other Foreign Service officers. The picture here on the presentation is of our 2019 class when they had an opportunity to have lunch with senior foreign policy makers, senior Foreign Service officers who were working in the department. In addition to talking about the Foreign Service lifestyle and career broadly, we will also dig into discussions about the lifestyle of the Foreign Service, the family and personal considerations, and start to get to work on developing professional skills related to public speaking, writing, and other really important skills that Foreign Service officers need as Foreign Service officers. Our domestic internship is a 10-week internship that takes place in between the first and second year of graduate school. Our Pickering Fellows will begin to apply to their domestic internships the summer before their domestic internships take place. So for our 2022 cohort, they will begin their applications to the domestic internship in the summer of 2022. And then they will plan to do their domestic internship in the summer of 2023. Our fellows are placed throughout the department, including functional and regional bureaus. Functional bureaus like the Operations Center or the Consular Affairs Unit. We also have folks who intern in regional bureaus such as East Asia Pacific and the Bureau for African Affairs, among others. This is really an opportunity to gain an understanding of how the department operates. The Department of State, Maine State in Washington, D.C. is a critical component of implementing foreign policy, and the experience at Maine State during the summer is really helpful for our fellows to understand how Maine State interacts with different posts and the various interlocutors who are very important in the foreign policy implementation process, including other government agencies and the like. Our Pickering program staff will work very closely with fellows to develop a plan for where it is that they'd like to apply, and then get them set for submitting that information to the department for placement. And then we will also provide, as Pickering program staff, a professional development series of activities and skills building opportunities throughout the summer that will include going into more depth about Foreign Service writing, public speaking and briefing, talking about the Foreign Service, financial management and planning, and a number of other types of sessions, really prepared to start getting our fellows ready to enter the Foreign Service as full-time employees. Pickering Fellows will also do a 10-week overseas internship that takes place after the second year of their graduate studies, after having completed their 2-year master's degree program. They, similar to the domestic internship, will have an opportunity to apply to posts overseas where it is that they'd like to go for the 10 weeks. This is a really great opportunity for our fellows to experience what the life of the Foreign Service is like in real time, and spend 10 weeks really taking on projects and portfolios of work that are very similar to what early career officers will be engaging with once they do enter the Foreign Service. Our Pickering program staff will again work very closely with the fellows to identify where it is that they'd like to apply for their overseas internship, and then we'll prepare them to go overseas for those 10 weeks. Again, this is a funded overseas internship, so our fellows will receive a stipend as well as travel to and from the host country. We will also provide overseas insurance as well as funding for visas, vaccinations, and the inoculations that fellows require before they go overseas. This is an excellent opportunity for our fellows to experience again, kind of get a sense of what the department operations look like overseas, and prepare for entry into the Foreign Service. After the overseas internship, our fellows do go into the Foreign Service shortly after, joining the next available A100 class, often the September class of A100. Let's talk a little bit about the Foreign Service career. All of our Pickering Fellows who successfully complete the program requirements and meet the Foreign Service entry requirements, including receiving and obtaining and maintaining their clearances, will receive employment with the State Department Foreign Service as Foreign Service generalists. They will serve out a 5-year service obligation, though I will tell you that most of our fellows still remain in the department as Foreign Service officers. We have had Pickering Fellows who have reached the highest levels of career service folks, including ambassadorial positions. We have folks who serve as the Deputy Chief of Mission, which is the second top position at an embassy. We have folks who are serving as assistant secretaries in the department here in Washington, D.C. And it really is quite a meaningful and rewarding, as well as dynamic and challenging career. Our Foreign Service officers represent U.S. foreign policy interests overseas, so the work that they're doing is quite unique. Oftentimes, the day-to-day operations of an embassy, or even here in the Washington, D.C. area, where many of our fellows spend some time during their career, is quite dynamic. It doesn't look the same every day. So if you are the type of person that is intellectually curious, that likes to change your roles and the positions it is that you're focused on, this is a job for you. Our Foreign Service officers will often change posts or rotations every 2 to 3 years over the course of their career, giving them an opportunity to work on lots of different types of policy and engage with lots of different types of communities around the world. Our Foreign Service officers are worldwide available, which means that they can serve in any of the 270 plus locations where we have U.S. embassy consulates or missions. And that means that the work that they're doing can look really different depending on where it is that they are. All of our Pickering Fellows will come into the State Department through the A100 training class, which is the 6-week training class that all Foreign Service officers, Foreign Service officer generalists complete. Following their A100 experience, they will receive additional training, whether it's related to the career track that they've chosen or whether it's related to language training. Yes, the department will invest in your language training if you are going to a place in the world where you may not have the proficiency that you need to do the job that you are assigned. So the 5-year service obligation for our fellows often will blow by. Many of our fellows remain in the Foreign Service long after their 5-year service obligation because the nature of the work is quite dynamic and gives them an opportunity to really see the impact of the work it is that they're doing. Our Foreign Service officers usually fall within our Foreign Service generalists fall into 5 career tracks that include consular, management, political, economic, and public diplomacy. And the work that our officers do can range based on their career track, but I'll just give you an idea of some of the different types of portfolios that Foreign Service officers work on. They are managing the facilities at an embassy or consulate, which means that they are managing lots of resources, both in terms of people and items. Think motor pool and housing and making sure that other Foreign Service officers have a place to stay when they are relocating overseas. We have our consular officers who work on American citizen services and ensuring that those who are interested in studying and visiting the United States have the visas and the paperwork to come to the United States, and ensuring that our borders are secure so that those who may not have the best intentions in coming to the United States are not permitted to enter. We also have our political and our economic officers who work very closely on providing reports back to Washington, D.C. on critical foreign policy issues, often providing recommendations and liaising with senior level officials in country related to a whole host of foreign policy related issues. And then we have our public diplomacy officers who are often engaging with the local communities, doing presentations about studying English in the United States or administering funding opportunities, grant opportunities for students and scholars to spend from that country to spend time in the United States and vice versa. Think about the Fulbright program. Many of our Foreign Service officers work on with Fulbright scholars both to and from the United States. So the work of our Foreign Service officers is quite dynamic. We will be doing several webinars throughout the course of the next couple of weeks before the application deadline to give you a sense more about what the Foreign Service lifestyle and career looks like. We'll invite Foreign Service officers to speak about their experiences as well, so that you as potential applicants will also have a better insight into what the career is that you're signing up for. The application for the Pickering Fellowship Program is as follows. All of the material that we ask candidates to submit must be submitted online. That includes all of the uploaded material that you're required to submit, as well as your letters of recommendation. Let me walk you through each of the components of the application. We do have a 600-word personal statement where our candidates are given the opportunity to tell our selection panel a little bit about who they are and why it is that they're applying to the Pickering Fellowship Program. What is it about public service, the Foreign Service, international affairs that really has you interested in applying to the fellowship? What is something unique about your background that you think will really contribute to the mission and goals of not just the Pickering Fellowship Program, but the Foreign Service? So the personal statement is a critical space for you to tell the selection panel a little bit about who you are. There is also a 400-word statement of financial need that we ask candidates to complete. This is really an opportunity for you to contextualize what your need for financial assistance is. And the way that I like to think about financial need is thinking about it in terms of a time frame. What was your family background, perhaps? What was your socioeconomic status going through undergrad, and what your need looked like then? What is your current need for financial assistance? And then what's your future need for financial assistance for graduate school? There are certainly elements that change and shift depending on where it is that you are. And this is really the opportunity for you to give us that nuance. We will ask you for lots of information, data points, if you will, about your financial status that include the student aid report that's generated by the FAFSA, as well as some information about income and loans. But those are only one part of financial need. We know that financial need manifests itself in different ways. So if you were a student that had to work while you were in undergrad and you don't have many loans as a result of that, but you are not expecting to have much in terms of support following for graduate school, mention that to us. If there's someone in the family perhaps that has had a medical issue, or perhaps COVID was particularly challenging for you, we want to hear those things in the financial needs statement. So make sure that that in the financial needs statement you're considering all of the different elements that may not come out immediately from the numbers it is that we're asking you for. And I'll just jump down straight to the student aid report and mention that the student aid report generated by FAFSA is a required document for our application. So make sure that you're filling that out early. The student aid report can often take 4 to 5 days to process. So if you have not yet received a 2021-2022 student aid report, do that as soon as possible. Don't wait until the last minute for an application deadline to come before submitting that information, because it is a required component of the application. So I'll jump back up to the 2 letters of recommendation. We also require 2 letters of recommendation for all candidates. One is a faculty or instructor. This is essentially someone who can speak to who you are in the classroom, your potential for success in graduate school. Again, we are paying for a 2-year master's degree program, so we want to know from someone who's seen you in the classroom that you have the potential for success as a graduate student. The second letter of recommendation is that from a community leader. This is someone who can speak to who you are outside of the classroom. Talk about who you are as an emerging professional. It can be a supervisor from an internship. It can be a student organization advisor who's seen your community service activity. Make sure that both of them are folks who like you and can say really nice things about you, and specific things about the work experience or the experiences that they've had with you. And I'll mention some points in a separate slide about how to approach recommendations. In addition to the recommendations, we will also require a proof of U.S. citizenship. So this will be a picture of your passport photo page, a copy of your birth certificate, or a copy of your certificate of naturalization. I will note here that if your name has changed for whatever reason, whether it's marriage or whether it's a name change, make sure that you have the documentation uploaded with your proof of citizenship so that we can see the name change documentation as well. I mentioned the student aid report. I'll remember, it's mandatory. If you received financial aid as an undergraduate student and you still have access to your financial aid award letter from your last year of undergrad, we would encourage you to upload this. This is not a required document, but if you do have it available, it does help, again, contextualize what your need in undergrad was. We do also require transcripts from all colleges and universities that you've attended for where you've received more than 6 credits or the equivalent of more than 2 classes of coursework. So if you attended a 2-year institution then transferred to a 4-year institution, the important thing here is to make sure that any documentation, any transcripts it is that you're submitting have the grades reflected from that coursework. So if you did transfer and all of your grades transferred to your current institution or your undergraduate institution where you received your BA, as long as we can see the grades from those classes, that's really what we're looking for here. We do have a space for you to upload your GRE or GMAT scores. This is optional. You do not have to upload it in order to be eligible, but you can if you'd like to. And then again, just as a reminder, all of the application materials and components must be received by September 22nd at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'd like to give you all just a few suggestions about how to create or to craft a competitive application to the Pickering Fellowship Program. We do have a number of resources on the website also that get into some areas where we suggest that you spend some time, but I'll just go over a few of them here. One, and I know that this sounds obvious, but sometimes it's not, is to read the application requirements carefully. Our application has a number of areas with really dense language. I'd encourage you to read that very carefully because it does ask you to confirm a few things about your eligibility. Make sure that you meet all three of those core requirements that I have mentioned in the overview, that you have a 3.2 GPA on a 4.0 scale, that you are a U.S. citizen at the time of the application deadline, and that you plan to pursue a 2-year master's degree program starting in the fall of 2022. Those are the three core main eligibility requirements in order to get your application through into our selection panel's review process, in addition to having all of the materials submitted on time as well. But make sure that you're reading to make sure that you meet all of the eligibility requirements. The personal statement is an opportunity for you to highlight your motivations for applying to the program. And really what we'd suggest here is to identify any experiences that you've had, skills, other opportunities that can demonstrate that you have the potential to be a successful Foreign Service officer. Be sure to respond directly to the prompt. Why do you want to be a Foreign Service officer? What do you bring to the program? Are there elements of volunteerism or internship experiences? Maybe there are opportunities that you've engaged with communities from different backgrounds. Tell us a little bit about who you are and make it personal. Don't just repeat the things that are listed on your resume, but tell us why it's important and how it connects to the overall mission of the program. I'll tell you that our selection panel is made up of retired and current Foreign Service officers. So they will be looking for potential on what it would be like to have you as a future colleague in the Department of State. We will also have folks who represent the graduate school experience. So you do also want to mention your potential for success in graduate school or highlight some of the skills that would make you successful in both of those areas as a Foreign Service officer and in graduate school. If you have had opportunities to overcome challenges, one of the important skills that it really does determine how successful someone can be in a career like the Foreign Service is resiliency. So if there are experiences that you've gone through that can really exemplify that, we'd encourage you to consider that as well. So tell the committee who you are and not simply what you've done. This should be weaved in throughout your personal statement and reflected in other areas of your application as well. I like to think of your application as a full package. How is the personal statement also confirming other things that are coming out in the rest of your application? Respond to all of the application questions. Any of the ones that are required will have a red asterisk next to them. And we'll have a technical webinar where I will demonstrate to this for everyone, but you will receive green check marks next to each of the tabs that once they are fully completed. So make sure that you're answering all of the questions. Highlight any honors and awards, professional and academic or even personal, and extracurricular activities that you've been involved with. Again, anything that can tie back to public service, international interests, working with folks from different backgrounds, resiliency. Highlight those things and use this as a time to brag on yourself, right? And if you have not had an opportunity to engage in as many extracurriculars because perhaps you've had to work or perhaps you've had family obligations where you've had to commit your hours elsewhere, we'd encourage you to highlight that as well. Talk about some of the accomplishments that you've had in your work experiences. Don't be shy about putting your retail and your customer service work here. I will tell you that as consular officers, you will be engaging with folks in a customer like circumstance, and having really great customer service is really important. Perhaps you worked in retail, and you started out as a boxer and moved up, or a stalker and moved up to cashier. They trust you with money. That's a pretty big deal. So I would encourage you to use all of the areas of the application to highlight any accomplishments that you've had, and tie it again back into the things that perhaps the 13 dimensions that make a Foreign Service officer successful. With regard to academic achievements and abilities, try to demonstrate your academic ability and your potential for success in grad school. This isn't just about GPA, but there are also lots of different ways to demonstrate this in the coursework that you've taken, which is why we ask for all of your transcripts. Because if, for example, you were anything like me as a student, perhaps that first semester was really rough. You started out as a biochem major and then decided after taking your first intro to international affairs that international affairs was really your passion. Make sure that those things, all of the material that can demonstrate that is included in in the paperwork that you're uploading. The other thing that I'd like to emphasize is recommenders. Make sure that you're selecting recommenders who like you. I know that this sounds a little bit obvious, but it's not always. And sometimes you're not really sure what the recommender will say about you. You have a little bit of discretion in terms of how you can navigate this. And the way that I encourage applicants to approach recommendations is to assume that they've forgotten all of the wonderful things that you've done with them. If it was for your faculty member, for example, if you were part of a larger class, perhaps they've now taught several other semesters of that large class since seeing you. So jot down a few notes to jog their memory about how they know you. Perhaps write some of the accomplishments it is that you've been able to achieve in their classroom, or perhaps in the internship that you served with them, and make sure that they have the information that they need to tie it to why it is that you're applying to this program. They can often be the Trojan horse to capture all of the things that you couldn't mention in your 600-word statement. The other thing to mention here is to remember to follow up with them. Our application system will send them an initial notice letting them know that you have asked them to serve as a recommendation. You are copied to this email. Please track that closely. It's your responsibility to make sure that they are submitting the recommendation material on time. One of the questions that we often get from folks who have been out of university life for a little while is, what if I don't have access to any of my instructors anymore? If you do not have contact with your recommender, with your faculty from undergrad, you can also select to have someone else who can speak to perhaps your writing abilities, your time management skills, again, focusing on the aspects of your work that would make you a successful candidate for graduate school as well. So those are just a couple of notes that I wanted to make sure to highlight about the recommendations. The last thing that I'll note about recommendations is not to focus on the title. Focus on someone who knows you well, who can speak to very specific experiences that you've had to make it more notable for the selection panel, what it is that you bring to the table. If you served at an internship and your supervisor knows you really well, but perhaps didn't have the director title, that's less important than the content of what it is that they're saying about you. So make sure that the person it is that you're selecting knows you well and can speak to you, to who you are. Also, remember that this is a financial need-based award, so that financial statement is important here, and connected to the last bullet point about proofreading and reviewing your statements is that with the financial needs statement, it is as important as your personal statement. So if your personal statement, if you've spent a lot of time working on it, really polishing it and making sure that it looks really great, but you haven't spent as much time on your financial needs statement, the selection panel will notice that. So make sure that you spend just as much time making sure that the message it is that you're transmitting in the financial needs statement is clear and well written as well. And then not just for the statements, but also for the rest of your application, make sure that you're proofreading really carefully, so that you are catching where there might be errors. I usually suggest putting all of the material into a Word document first, and then copying it over to the application to make sure that you catch any grammatical errors and spelling errors that might come up. So the application deadline for the 2022 Pickering Foreign Affairs application is due on September 22nd, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can access the materials all the way up until the deadline. You do have to submit your application in order for us to submit as final in order for us to consider your application as complete. You can submit as final any time up until the application deadline. You can also edit your application at any time before the deadline. So even though you've submitted as final, maybe you come back and you say, oh, I need to edit this one thing. You can do that. You have, again, up until midnight of the 22nd to do that. You can visit our website, and I would encourage you to, the pickeringfellowship.org website, where we have a whole host of resources, additional resources about crafting a competitive application. We will post our events here. You will also see information about clearances, obligations, and benefits laid out pretty in great detail on our website. If you do have additional follow-on questions, please feel free to email us at pickeringfellowship@howard.edu, and we will get back in touch with you within 48 hours of having received your question. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook, where we continually provide updates about the application, provide tips and profiles of our fellows. It is a great place to get to know our fellows and their experiences, and a little bit more about what you might expect as a Pickering Fellow. Thank you again for your interest in the Pickering Fellowship Program, and we look forward to receiving your application.